Hey there, today I want to show you one of the new features of xUnit v3. I think it's my favorite one, to be honest, and I promise you that once you see it, you will want to use it every single time, and it's a great reason to move to v3. So let's go into the code, and I will show you the typical way of addressing that nowadays. I will explain the limitations of the current version with v2, and I will show you how to transform your code quite easily to apply that new version of the v3, new feature of v3, and I promise you that you will love it. So let's take a look into the code. So what do I have here? I have an API and the tests of that API. The tests here will be kind of like integration tests. So they are going through the API. The API is using a database. So it's a type of scenario where you have an external resource and you want to bring that dependency up. So it might be an integration test. It might be a functional test. It might be an end-to-end test. In all of those types of tests, these can be extremely useful. So let's see what the API is doing. If you go into the API, you will find in our program CS that basically I have a database that is a Postgres database, simple database, and I'm using Entity Framework, by the way. And also, I have a set of endpoints, some to create to-do items and some to create and get projects. Okay, they all share the same DB context and the same database. So on my tests, if I go into our API.tests, you can see that I have a project controller tests, and there I have the tests for the project. Okay, create the project, check that the thing was created correctly. For example, getting a project, checking that I can get the project once I create it, all of that stuff. And I have exactly the same for the to-do controller. Okay, so in the to-do controller, I'm doing exactly the same type of test. What I want to show you now is that if you go to the project controller and to the to-do controller and you put them side by side, you will notice that both of them are part of the same collection. What is this? This is an attribute to say they are part of the same collection fixture, so they have the same fixture. A fixture in xUnit is a way to create kind of like a shared context, putting all the tests inside of the same fixture, but that as a side effect. That is, all the tests sharing the same fixture, they will run in sequence instead of running in parallel. So why do we do that? Because we want to do things like this. We want to have a way to have startup code or dispose code that runs once for all the tests. For example, bringing a database up. For example, bringing an API up. For example, creating the conditions, setting up the data, disposing the data, destroying the data, creating a file, all of those preconditions that you need for a set of tests. So in this case, my API test fixture, what it's doing is that I have a web application factory. That is the way to have an API in memory that I can use an HTTP client to call it. So this web application factory is this API that we have here. Okay, keep that in mind. Now, the other thing that this fixture is doing is that it's starting a container, a test container using Postgres. If you want information about test containers, I have a video on it that I can link on the top. So, and here what do I have? I have the Postgres container definition. So this is the builder to build that container. I have this method that will basically replace the DB context to use the connection string from that container, from test containers. And also I have the initialize and the dispose to make sure that I start the container and that I dispose the container once the test is finished. So, but the thing is, that is the part related to that collection, is that since both the project and the to-dos use the same database, and I don't want to have the same database running multiple times, I'm starting this only once, so as a collection, and this way I start only a single database and I run all the tests against that database. This is a common approach. But what's the drawback of this approach? The drawback is that now, by the fact that both of them share the same fixture, my project tests need to run in sequence with the to-do tests. I can't run them in parallel when in fact they don't collide with each other. So they could run in parallel. There's no good reason to have them running in sequence. And that is what is changing in V3. While in V2 was extremely hard to put that in practice, let me show you how simple it is to do it in V3. So if you go to V3, what you need to do is quite simple. First thing, we don't need our API test collection anymore. So this class can be destroyed. Delete it, what means that we don't need this collection anymore, and we don't need this anymore. So now, if you think about it, I don't have a fixture, right? I'm not sharing a fixture between those two. How can I do it with V3? In V3, you can go to this fixture that we have, and it's quite simple. You just need to do this. You go here and you say assembly fixture, type of, and here you say the name of this class, of your fixture. Make sure that you have this before the namespace. And what does this mean? This means that this fixture now will run once per assembly. So I know that inside of this assembly, this test assembly, I will run this code, the startup of this code, only once, and the dispose only once as well. So imagine I need to run all the tests from this test project. What does xUnit will do? Let me look for the assembly fixture. Do I have the assembly fixture? Yes, I have. So let me run the startup. So either the constructor, or if I'm using the iAsync lifetime, run the initialize async. Then I run all the tests of that assembly. By the end, I will run the dispose. Okay? It's just that, and I don't need to link those tests to that fixture, and I can receive that fixture as a parameter if I need, like I'm doing here, to create the HTTP client. So once I have that, I can run the tests, and they will run successfully. I honestly believe that this is extremely useful because many of the collection fixtures that I see out there, in fact, they can be an assembly fixture, and the assembly fixture would be the best tool for the job. And let me tell you one more thing. If you go to this code and you see those squiggly lines here on those asynchronous methods, this is because of another new feature of xUnit v3, and you can see what's that feature about if you watch this video right here. And I will see you in the next one.